My son hosted a New Year Eve dinner with 25 relatives in my own house. I sat at a folding table in the corner while they feasted on porcelain. Then my daughter-in-law stood up, walked to the fireplace, and ripped my wedding picture off the wall. She tossed it into the trash can like a used napkin and screamed, "You are a leech, Wallace. You have drained this family dry." My son just watched and sipped his wine. I smiled, picked up the frame, and walked out into the snow. A week later, they left me 66 missed calls. But before I tell you how I made them pay, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I am Wallace Jefferson, 69 years old. My hands are rough from 40 years at the Detroit steel mills, and my knees ache when the temperature drops. I built this 4-story Victorian house in Chicago with overtime pay and sweat. I bought every brick, every beam, and every window. Yet on the last night of the year, I felt like a trespasser in my own living room. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck scents that did not belong to the home Etta and I had created. Etta was my late wife, and her spirit usually filled these rooms with warmth. Tonight, however, the air was cold and sharp. My son Kendrick had asked to host the New Year Eve party here. He said it would be a family reunion. I agreed because I missed the noise of life in these hallways. I did not expect to be relegated to the shadows. In the center of the dining room stood the mahogany table I had crafted by hand 30 years ago. Sitting around it were 25 people. Most of them were strangers to me. They were Sloane's family. Her parents, her cousins, her friends from the marketing firm. They clinked crystal champagne flutes and laughed loudly at jokes I could not hear. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, sat at the head of the table. She looked like a queen on a throne. She wore a silver dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was radiant, beautiful, and completely terrifying. She had orchestrated this entire evening down to the seating chart. And where was I? I was not at the head of the table. I was not even at the main table. Sloane had set up a small, wobbly card table in the corner near the kitchen door. It was the kind of table you use for children who spill their juice. But there were no children here. It was just me. I looked down at my place setting. While the guests at the main table ate off the fine bone china Etta had collected for special occasions, I had a red plastic plate. They had heavy silverware. I had a plastic fork that bent if I pressed it too hard. Beside my plate was a plastic cup filled with tap water, while bottles of imported wine flowed freely just 10 feet away. It was a calculated insult. It was a message. Sloane was telling me exactly where I stood in her new world order. I was disposable. I looked at Kendrick. My son sat to Sloane's right. He looked handsome in his navy suit, but his posture was weak. He kept his eyes on his plate, cutting his meat with intense focus. He knew this was wrong. He knew treating his father like a servant in his own home was a violation of everything I had taught him. But he said nothing. He was terrified of her. Every time Sloane laughed, Kendrick flinched slightly, as if checking to see if he was allowed to smile too. I tried to catch his eye. I wanted to ask him why he let this happen. I wanted to see the boy I raised, not this puppet. Finally, he looked up. His eyes met mine for a fleeting second. I saw shame there. Deep, burning shame. But then Sloane placed her hand on his forearm, her manicured nails digging into his jacket sleeve. Kendrick immediately looked away, returning his attention to the woman who controlled his life. The conversation at the main table grew louder. They were talking about real estate, about vacations in Europe, about the stupidity of the working class. A woman with hair the color of straw pointed a fork at the ceiling. She said loudly that this house had good bones, but the decor was hideous. She said it looked like a museum for poor people. Sloane laughed the loudest. She said they were planning a complete renovation soon. She said they would rip out the dark wood paneling and paint everything white. She said they needed to erase the gloomy history of this place. My grip tightened on my plastic fork. That dark wood paneling was oak. I had installed it myself with my father when I was 20 years old. It was not gloomy history. It was my legacy. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to tell them to get out of my house. But I remained seated. I had promised Etta on her deathbed that I would be patient with Kendrick. I had promised I would try to keep the peace. So I took a bite of the food on my plastic plate. It was cold. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was raspy, unused to speaking over such noise. The room did not go quiet. No one heard me. I cleared my throat and spoke louder. "Excuse me, Sloane." The laughter died down. 25 pairs of eyes turned to the corner. They looked at me as if the furniture had suddenly started speaking. Sloane turned slowly, holding her wine glass by the stem. She raised an eyebrow. Her expression was one of exaggerated patience, like a teacher dealing with a slow student. "Yes, Wallace," she asked. "Do you need a refill on your water?" I gestured to the food. "I just wanted to ask, is this the beef stew recipe Etta used to make? It tastes familiar, but something is missing." The silence that followed was sharp. Sloane put down her glass. The sound of glass hitting the wood echoed. She smiled, but her eyes were ice. "We did not make stew, Wallace," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "We hired a catering service, a very expensive one. This is bœuf bourguignon." "It is French. I would not expect you to know the difference. Your palate is used to simpler things, like canned soup." Her mother, a woman who wore too much jewelry, giggled. "That is so true, Sloane," she said. "Some people just do not appreciate quality." I felt the heat rise in my neck. It was not about the food. It was about the erasure. They were erasing Etta. They were erasing me. I looked at Kendrick again. "Son," I said, "you remember your mother's stew. You used to beg for it on your birthday." Kendrick turned pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sloane cut him off. "Stop living in the past, Wallace," she snapped. "Nobody cares about the old days. We are celebrating the future. My future. Kendrick's future. A future where we do not have to eat peasant food." She stood up then. She picked up a spoon and tapped it against her glass. Ding, ding, ding. The sound pierced my ears. "I would like to propose a toast," she announced. The guests raised their glasses. I sat with my plastic cup, my hands trembling slightly. "To family," Sloane said. "To success. And to taking what is rightfully ours. This year is going to be big. Kendrick and I have big plans. We are finally going to get the life we deserve. No more waiting, no more carrying dead weight." She looked directly at me when she said dead weight. The guests murmured their agreement. "Hear, hear," they said. Sloane turned away from the table. She walked toward the fireplace. Above the mantel hung the only thing in the room that still felt like mine. It was a large, framed black and white photograph. It was taken 45 years ago. It showed Etta and me on our wedding day. We were standing on the porch of this very house. Etta was laughing, her head thrown back, and I was looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. It was a beautiful photo. It was the heart of this house. Sloane stood in front of it. She tilted her head. "This thing," she said. "It really clashes with the aesthetic. It is so depressing. Old people. Dead people. It brings the whole vibe of the party down." "Don't touch that," I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the room. Sloane ignored me. She reached up. Her hands grabbed the heavy wooden frame. "Kendrick, tell her to stop," I said. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Kendrick, that is your mother." Kendrick looked at his plate. He put a piece of meat in his mouth and chewed. He did not look up. Sloane pulled. The wire snapped. She held the large frame in her hands for a moment. Then, with a look of pure disgust, she walked over to the large metal trash bin that the catering staff had set up near the bar. "You are a leech, Wallace," she said loud and clear. She raised the photo high. "You occupy this huge house all by yourself. You hoard your pension. You make Kendrick feel guilty. You are a parasite. You have drained this family dry. It is time for you to let go." She dropped the frame. It did not land softly. It crashed into the metal bin. I heard the distinct sound of glass cracking against the metal rim. A jagged sound, a sound of something breaking that could never be fixed. The room went completely silent. Even the catering staff stopped moving. Everyone looked at me. They expected me to shout. They expected the angry black man from the stereotype to explode. They wanted a scene. They wanted to justify their contempt. I looked at the trash bin. I looked at Sloane, who was breathing hard, her face flushed with the thrill of cruelty. I looked at Kendrick, who was taking a sip of wine, his hand shaking so badly the red liquid rippled. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm of a man who realizes the war has finally begun. The time for patience was over. The time for mercy was gone. I walked past the card table. I walked past the main table with the fine china. I walked straight to the trash bin. Sloane took a step back, perhaps afraid I would strike her. I did not even look at her. I reached into the bin. I ignored the sharp edges of the broken glass. I pulled out the photograph. The glass was cracked down the middle, separating Etta from me, but the photo was still there. I brushed a piece of potato skin off Etta's face. I tucked the frame under my arm. Then I turned to my son. "Happy New Year, Kendrick," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of a father who is disappointed, not angry. "Enjoy the house. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the illusion." I did not wait for an answer. I walked to the front door. I did not stop to get my coat from the closet. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out. The wind hit me like a hammer. It was 10 degrees below zero in Chicago. The snow was falling thick and fast. I was wearing only a thin sweater, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a fire burning in my chest, a fire that would consume everything they thought they owned. I walked down the driveway, the snow crunching under my dress shoes. Behind me, the warm glow of my house spilled onto the snow. I heard the door slam shut. They had locked me out. I kept walking. I walked toward the gas station 3 miles away. I had a phone call to make, and that call would be the first domino in a chain that would bring their entire world crashing down. They thought they had thrown out the trash. They did not realize they had just thrown away their only shield. The fluorescent lights of the gas station hummed overhead. It was a stark contrast to the crystal chandeliers hanging in my dining room 3 miles away. I stood at the counter and paid $2 for a black coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. The cashier, a young kid with headphones around his neck, barely looked up. He did not know that the old man in the cheap sweater standing before him was technically a millionaire. He did not know that the credit card in my wallet had a limit higher than the value of this entire building. I preferred it that way. Being underestimated is the greatest tactical advantage a man can have. I walked out to the parking lot and sat on a curb cleared of snow. My breath misted in the freezing air. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had not called in months. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Grady. He owned the most successful auto repair chain in Chicago, but he still answered his phone like he was under a car hood. "I am at the Shell station on 5th, I said. "I need a ride." Grady did not ask why. He did not ask where my car was. He just said he would be there in 10 minutes. That is loyalty. That is family. While I waited, I opened my banking app. I scrolled past the checking account my son knew about, the one with the meager pension deposits. I logged into the master account. The numbers on the screen were long and comforting. Years ago, after Etta passed, I made a decision. I saw how money changed people. I saw how Kendrick was becoming soft, always looking for the easy way out. So I created an irrevocable trust. I moved the deed to the Victorian house, my investment portfolios, and my savings into it. I named Kendrick as the beneficiary, which made him feel like he owned everything, but he never read the fine print. I was the sole trustee. I had absolute control. The house he lived in, the car he drove, the credit cards he gave to his wife, they all functioned at my discretion. I tapped the screen. I selected the supplementary American Express Platinum card ending in 4021. The card was currently in Kendrick's pocket, the card that was paying for the expensive French catering at my house. I pressed the button that said Freeze Card. A small confirmation window popped up. I confirmed it. The status changed from active to suspended. I took a sip of my terrible coffee and waited for the show to begin. Meanwhile, back at the house, the atmosphere was shifting. The guests had finished their main course. The wine bottles were empty. The laughter was loud and boisterous. Sloane was in her element. She snapped her fingers at the head caterer, a man named Jean-Pierre, who took his job very seriously. "Jean-Pierre," she announced, her voice carrying over the chatter. "We are ready for the dessert course, and open another case of the vintage Pinot Noir." Jean-Pierre stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable. He held a small portable card reader in his hand. "Madame," he said softly, "before we proceed, there is a small matter of the payment. The deposit covered the appetizers, but the balance for the dinner and the wine must be settled now. It is company policy for events over $10,000. Sloane rolled her eyes. She gestured vaguely toward Kendrick. "My husband will handle it. Kendrick, give him the card." Kendrick smiled nervously. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the heavy metal card. He handed it to the caterer with a flourish, trying to impress his father-in-law who was sitting across from him. "Put it on the corporate account," Kendrick joked, though he did not have a corporation. Jean-Pierre inserted the card. The machine beeped. A red light flashed. He frowned and tried again. Another beep. Another red light. "Sir, the card has been declined," Jean-Pierre said. His voice was polite but firm. The table went quiet. Kendrick laughed, a high-pitched, anxious sound. "That is impossible," he said. "There is no limit on that card. Try it again. It must be your machine." Jean-Pierre tried a third time. Decline. Code 05. Do not honor. It is not the machine, Sir Jean-Pierre said, his voice losing its warmth. The bank has suspended the account. Do you have another form of payment? The total is $12,400. Kendrick turned pale. He did not have $12,000. He did not even have $1,000 in his personal account. Sloan had spent his last paycheck on the deposit for this party. He looked at Sloan. Panic began to rise in his chest. Sloan's smile vanished. She glared at Kendrick. What do you mean, declined? She hissed. You told me the finances were handled. You told me the trust fund deposits cleared yesterday. They did. Kendrick stammered. I mean, they should have. I do not understand. Maybe it is a fraud alert, maybe because we are spending so much at once. Sloan stood up. Her chair fell backward with a crash. This is embarrassing, Kendrick. Fix it. Call the bank. Kendrick pulled out his phone. He dialed the customer service number on the back of the card. He put it on speaker, his hands shaking. The automated voice filled the silent dining room. We are sorry, the robotic voice said cheerfully. This account has been suspended by the primary account holder. Please contact the administrator for more details. The primary account holder. The administrator. Sloane's eyes widened. She grabbed the phone from Kendrick's hand and ended the call. She knew who the administrator was. We all knew. But she could not believe it. She refused to believe that the old man she had just thrown out into the snow had the power to stop her party. She turned to the guests. Everyone, please, it is just a technical glitch. My father-in-law is senile. He probably messed up the paperwork again. We will sort this out in a moment. She turned to Jean-Pierre. Do you accept checks? Jean-Pierre shook his head. Not for this amount, and not after a declined card. I am afraid we cannot serve the dessert, and if payment is not received in 15 minutes, my staff will begin packing up the remaining wine and equipment. We will also need to contact the police to file a report for theft of services. The word police hovered in the air like smoke. Sloane's mother gasped. Her father looked at Kendrick with pure disgust. The guests began to whisper. This was not the triumphant New Year celebration Sloane had promised. This was a disaster. Sloane grabbed Kendrick by the lapels of his expensive suit. You find him, she snarled. You find your father and you make him fix this. Now. Back in the truck with Grady, my phone vibrated. I ignored it. It vibrated again. And again. Then came the text messages. I watched them pop up on the screen, illuminating the dark cab of the truck. First message from Kendrick, Dad pickup. Emergency. Card not working. Second message from Kendrick. Please, Dad. Jean-Pierre is threatening to call the cops. Sloane is going crazy. Third message. This one was from Sloane. You spiteful old man. I know you did this. Turn the card back on right now. You are humiliating us in front of my family. If you do not fix this in 5 minutes, I will change the locks for real this time. You will never step foot in this house again. I read the message twice. I looked at the snow falling outside the window. I thought about the picture of Etta lying in the trash can with cracked glass. I thought about the plastic fork. I thought about the way they looked at me as if I were a stain on their perfect life. I did not type a response. I did not get angry. I simply turned off the screen and put the phone back in my pocket. Grady glanced at me. Trouble, he asked. Not for me, I replied. Just a little lesson in economics. Can we drive past the house? I want to see if the lights go out. Grady laughed, a low rumble in his chest. You are a cold man, Wallace. I looked out the window. No, Grady. I am not cold. I am just finally adjusting the thermostat. We drove down the street. As we passed my Victorian home, I saw the catering van backing into the driveway. I saw the guests putting on their coats, their faces grim, and then just as I expected, the beautiful lights on the porch flickered. The power company had just processed the disconnect order I had scheduled earlier that morning. The house plunged into darkness. Inside that dark house, the chaos was just beginning. But out here in the truck, it was warm. The war had started and I had just fired the first cannon. They thought I was a helpless old man. They were about to learn that I was the one holding the keys to their entire reality. The sun rose over Chicago the next morning, but it brought no warmth to my world. I had spent the night in a cheap motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. I went to a local diner for breakfast, a place where I had eaten eggs and toast every Tuesday for 10 years. The waitress, a woman named Betty, who usually greeted me with a smile and a fresh pot of coffee, did not smile today. She placed my menu on the table with a thud and refused to meet my eyes. I soon realized why. I pulled out my phone and opened social media. My notification feed was exploding. Sloan had been busy while I slept. She had posted a video on TikTok and Facebook at 3 in the morning. In the video, she was crying. Her mascara was smeared artfully across her cheeks, and she was wrapped in a blanket looking small and fragile. The caption read, "Surviving a toxic family member. Dealing with my father-in-law's addiction and abuse." I tapped play. Sloan looked into the camera, her voice trembling. "I did not want to make this public," she whispered to her thousands of followers. "But last night was a nightmare. My husband's father ruined our New Year celebration. He was drunk. He was aggressive. He attacked me in front of my family because I refused to give him money for his gambling debts. We have tried to help him for years. We gave him a home. We paid his bills. But he is dangerous. We had to ask him to leave for our own safety. Please pray for us." I scrolled down to the comments. They were like daggers. One comment read, "Kick the old man out. Do not let him ruin your mental health." Another said, "He sounds like a monster. Call the cops on him." A third one said, "Why do the elderly think they are entitled to our money?" Cut him off, girl. Thousands of strangers were judging me based on a lie. Sloan had turned the narrative upside down. She had painted herself as the martyr and me as the villain. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was isolating me. She wanted to make sure that if I tried to fight back, no one would believe me. She was destroying my reputation before I could even open my mouth. Betty walked by my table again. "I am sorry, Wallace," she said quietly, her voice cold. "But the manager saw the video. He thinks it is best if you do not eat here today. We do not want any trouble." I did not argue. I did not try to explain that I do not drink, that I do not gamble, and that the house she was crying in was paid for by my sweat. I simply stood up, left a $5 bill on the table, and walked out. The court of public opinion had already reached a verdict. I drove back to my house. I needed to confront Kendrick. I needed to look my son in the eye and ask him if he was part of this lie. But when I turned onto my street, I slammed on the brakes. My truck skidded slightly on the ice before coming to a halt. There, on the pristine white snow of the front lawn, was my life. Sloan had not just changed the locks. She had emptied my room. My clothes were scattered across the yard like garbage. My heavy winter coats were buried under fresh powder. My engineering textbooks, the ones I had kept since university, were lying open, their pages flapping in the biting wind, soaking up the moisture. I stepped out of the truck. The cold air burned my lungs. I walked toward the pile. I saw my toolbox, the one my father gave me, thrown upside down, wrenches and screwdrivers rusting in the snow. And then I saw it. The quilt Etta had made for our 25th anniversary. It was lying in a puddle of mud near the driveway. The front door opened. Sloan stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a thick fur coat and holding a mug of steaming coffee. She looked down at me with a smirk of absolute triumph. "Get your trash off my property, Wallace," she shouted, "or I will call the city and have you fined for littering." I stood there, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Every instinct in my body told me to run up those stairs. Every instinct told me to scream, to break down the door, to demand respect. But I remembered the video. I remembered the comments. If I yelled now, if I showed any anger, she would record it. She would post it, and it would prove everything she said was true. So I did nothing. I swallowed the rage until it tasted like bile in my throat. I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Sloan yelled. "Are you calling your imaginary friends?" I did not answer. I opened the camera app. I took a photo of the clothes in the snow. I took a photo of the ruined books. I walked over to the quilt and took a close-up of the mud stains. I took a video of Sloan standing on the porch, capturing her smirk and her yelling. "You are pathetic," she screamed. "Go sleep under a bridge." I recorded that too. I documented every single item she had destroyed. I documented the illegal eviction. I documented the malice. When I was done, I picked up the quilt and my toolbox. I left the rest. The clothes and books were ruined anyway. They were just things, and things could be replaced. But what she had done today, the cruelty she had shown that could not be undone. I got back into my truck and locked the door. Sloan was still yelling from the porch, waving her hand as if shooing away a stray dog. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. I drove until I reached the parking lot of a quiet park. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a long time. Then I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. Mr. Solomon answered on the first ring. He was the best estate attorney in Chicago, a man who charged $600 an hour and was worth every penny, Wallace Solomon said. His voice was sharp professional. I saw the video on TikTok. My paralegal sent it to me. Do you want me to file a cease and desist for defamation? Not yet, I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. Let her talk. Let her dig her grave a little deeper. The more she lies, the worse it will be for her when the truth comes out. But I want to activate the contingency plan. Are you sure? Solomon asked. Once we start this, there is no going back. It will get ugly. It is already ugly, Solomon, I replied. They threw my life onto the lawn. They destroyed Etta's quilt. I am done being the father. Today I am just the landlord, and they are delinquent tenants. Understood, Solomon said. I have the file open right now. Execute phase 1, I commanded. Cut the nutrition. I want you to contact the utility companies immediately. The electric, the gas, the water, the internet, all of those accounts are in my name. I want them shut off by noon. Tell them the owner has vacated the premises. Consider it done, Solomon said. And what about the monthly stipend from the trust? Cancel it, I said. And Solomon, yes, Wallace. Contact the bank. Invoke the bad boy clause on the trust fund. Freeze all assets attached to Kendrick's name. I want every card, every checkbook, every transfer blocked. If they want to buy a loaf of bread, I want them to have to search the sofa cushions for change. I hung up the phone. I looked at the muddy quilt on the passenger seat. I reached over and brushed the dirt off the fabric. I am sorry, Etta, I whispered, but they have to learn. You cannot bite the hand that feeds you and expect to stay full. I started the truck. The smear campaign had hurt, yes, but they had made a fatal mistake. They thought they were fighting a lonely old man. They did not realize they had just declared war on the bank, and the bank always wins. The financial strangulation began quietly. It did not start with a bang or a shout, but with a simple declined transaction at a Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. Kendrick was trying to buy a caramel macchiato and a croissant. It was his morning ritual, a small luxury he felt entitled to despite the chaos of the previous night. He tapped his phone against the reader. The machine buzzed. He tried again. The barista, a young woman with a nose ring, gave him a sympathetic look that stung his pride. Kendrick stepped out of the line, his face burning. He opened his banking app. He expected to see a balance of $4,000 in his checking account. That was the monthly stipend I deposited from the family trust on the first of every month. It was the money he used to pretend he was a successful entrepreneur. But when the screen loaded, the balance was not $4,000. It was $0. He refreshed the page. $0. He checked the savings account. $0. He checked the emergency fund. $0. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He called the bank immediately. He was put on hold for 10 minutes, forced to listen to upbeat jazz music while his world crumbled. When the representative finally answered, her voice was polite but unyielding. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, "the primary trustee has exercised his right to revoke all discretionary disbursements. The accounts have been swept. The cards have been canceled," Kendrick argued. He shouted. He told them he was Wallace Jefferson's son. He told them it was a mistake. But the bank did not care about his last name. They cared about the signature on the trust documents, and that signature was mine. He walked out of the coffee shop, his hands shaking. He had no cash. His gas tank was near empty. He had to drive home to the Victorian house, the only asset he thought he still controlled. He did not know that I had already moved on to the second phase of the siege. While Kendrick was staring at his empty bank account, the house itself was turning against them. I am a retired engineer. I spent 40 years designing control systems for steel mills. I know how to regulate heat pressure and flow. When I renovated the Victorian house 10 years ago, I did not just install a standard thermostat. I installed a custom industrial control system. I wired the furnace, the water heater, and the electrical subpanels into a central logic controller that was hardwired into the basement foundation. It was a system designed to last a century. It was also a system designed to obey only one master. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the temperature in Chicago dropped to 5 degrees. Inside the house, the furnace roared to life, but only for a moment. Then my remote command reached the central processor. The gas valve closed. The blower fan stopped. The pilot light flickered and died. Sloane was the first to notice. She was lounging in the master bedroom, scrolling through the thousands of likes on her victimhood video. She pulled her silk robe tighter around herself. She walked over to the thermostat on the wall and tapped the screen. It was blank. She tapped it again. Nothing. She went to the bathroom to run a hot bath. She turned the gold-plated handle. The water sputtered and came out, but it was ice cold. By noon, the house was 50 degrees. By 1 o'clock, it was 45. Sloane was furious. She called a heating and cooling repair company. She demanded an emergency visit. She told them money was no object, even though she had none. The technician arrived an hour later. He was a burly man named Mike. He went down to the basement with his tools. Sloane followed him, her arms crossed, her breath visible in the freezing air. "Make it work," she demanded. "It is probably just a fuse." Mike opened the panel on the furnace. He frowned. He traced the wires back to a gray metal box mounted on the concrete wall. The box had a heavy steel padlock on it. It had no keypad. It had no screen. It only had a single red LED light that was blinking slowly. Lady Mike said, scratching his head. "I have never seen a setup like this in a residential home. This looks like something you would find in a factory. The furnace is fine physically, but this gray box here has cut the control signal. It is a hard lockout." "Well, bypass it," Sloane screamed. "Cut the wires." "I cannot do that," Mike said. "If I cut these wires, the failsafe engages. It will lock the gas line permanently at the street valve. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. Do you have the key for this padlock?" Sloane stared at the lock. It was an old, heavy, brass lock. She realized with a sinking feeling that she had seen that lock before. It used to hang on my belt loop. "No," she whispered. "I do not have the key." Mike packed up his tools. "Then I cannot help you. You need the system administrator to reset the logic controller. That will be $150 for the service call." Sloane exploded. She refused to pay. Mike just shrugged and left, leaving them in the growing cold. The house, once their warm fortress of entitlement, was becoming a refrigerator. The pipes groaned in the walls. The expensive tropical plants Sloane had bought for the living room began to wilt in the chill. At 3 o'clock, Kendrick came home. He found Sloane sitting on the couch, wrapped in 3 blankets and wearing her fur coat. She was trembling not just from the cold, but from rage. "He did this," she hissed. "Your father." He turned off the heat. He turned off the water. "He is trying to freeze us out." Kendrick sat down next to her. He was too afraid to tell her about the bank accounts. He thought if he could just get the heat back on, maybe he could delay the inevitable explosion. He pulled out his phone. "I will call him," Kendrick said. "I will make him turn it back on." He dialed my number. I was sitting in my penthouse apartment downtown. The fireplace was crackling. I had a cup of hot tea in my hand. The room was set to a comfortable 72 degrees. I saw Kendrick's name on the screen. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I did not pick up. Sloane grabbed the phone from him. She dialed again. This time she left a voicemail. "Wallace," she screamed into the phone. "You are a sick old man, do you hear me? You are sick. It is freezing in here. We could die. If you do not turn the heat back on right now, I will call the police and tell them you are trying to murder us. Pick up the phone." I listened to the voicemail. I did not feel guilt. I felt a sense of clinical detachment. They were healthy adults. They had legs. They could leave. They were not prisoners. They were squatters who refused to accept reality. I opened my laptop. I did not reply to her text. I did not return her call. Instead, I composed a single email. Subject statement of accounts and lease violation. I attached a PDF file. It was a 20-page document. It was not a letter. It was a forensic accounting of the last 3 years. Page 1 listed the mortgage payments I had made. Page 2 listed the utility bills I had covered. But page 3 through 20 were the most interesting. They were the unauthorized withdrawals Kendrick had made from the joint account I had entrusted him with for house repairs. Item Louis Vuitton handbag, $4,000. Item lease payment for BMW X5, $1,200. Item vacation to Tulum, $6,000. Item catering deposit for New Year Eve, $5,000. The total sum of misappropriated funds was $200,000. I added a short message in the body of the email. "Dear Kendrick and Sloane, the heat is off because the utility payments are now your responsibility. The accounts are empty because you spent the money on luxuries instead of necessities. You have heat when you pay for heat. You have water when you pay for water. You have 24 hours to restore the funds you stole from the trust, or I will hand this document to the district attorney. Stay warm." I hit send. Back in the freezing Victorian house, Kendrick's phone pinged. He opened the email. The light from the screen illuminated his pale face. Sloane leaned over his shoulder to read it. She saw the list. She saw the numbers. She saw the threat of the district attorney. For the first time since the war began, Sloane stopped screaming. She looked at the long list of things she had bought with my money. She looked at the cold fireplace. She looked at Kendrick. He knows, Kendrick whispered. He knows everything. Sloane stood up. She paced the room, her fur coat swishing around her. She was cornered, but a cornered animal does not surrender. It attacks. This is fake, she said, her voice shaking. He is bluffing. He would never send his own son to jail. He is just trying to scare us. She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the wall shared with the study. He thinks he is smart, she said. He thinks he can lock us out of the systems. He forgot one thing. We are inside. He is outside. She turned to Kendrick with a manic glint in her eyes. Get the sledgehammer, she ordered. Kendrick looked at her confused. Why? Because she said, grabbing a lamp and smashing it against the wall. If he wants to play games with the house, let's see how much he loves this house when we start tearing it apart. We are going to find where he hid that money. I know he has cash in these walls. Old men like him always hide cash in the walls. Sloane was wrong. There was no cash in the walls. But there was something else. Something far more dangerous than money. And she was about to find it. The cold inside the house was becoming a physical weight. It pressed down on Kendrick's shoulders as he sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone. It had been 24 hours since I sent the email. 24 hours since I cut the financial cord. The house was now 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sloane was pacing the room like a caged tiger. She was wearing 3 sweaters and her fur coat, but her shivering was not just from the temperature. It was from withdrawal. Withdrawal from power. Withdrawal from money. Fix this, Kendrick, she snapped. Her breath formed a cloud in the freezing air. You are a man. Do something. We need cash. We need a heater. We need food that is not from a can. Kendrick looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. I cannot fix it, Sloane. Dad locked everything. The trust is frozen. The credit cards are dead. I have applied for 3 credit cards online this morning, but they all got rejected. My credit score just tanked because of the missed payments on the BMW. Sloane grabbed a ceramic mug from the table and threw it against the wall. It shattered, the sound sharp and violent in the quiet house. I do not care about your credit score, she screamed. Get money. I do not care how you do it. Go to a payday lender. Go to a loan shark. I do not care if you have to sell your kidney. Just get me $5,000 right now so I can turn the heat back on and hire a lawyer to sue your father. Kendrick flinched. He had never seen her like this. The mask of the sophisticated socialite had melted away, revealing a desperate, ugly hunger underneath. But he was weak. He had always been weak. That was why he married her. He needed someone to tell him what to do. He pulled up a contact on his phone. It was a number a friend from his gambling days had given him. A place called Quick Cash Solutions in a bad part of town. The interest rate was 300%. It was financial suicide. Are you sure? Kendrick whispered. If I do this and we cannot pay it back next week, they will come for the car. They might come for me. Sloane leaned over the table. Her eyes were hard and flat. If you do not do it, Kendrick, you will not have to worry about them coming for you. You will have to worry about me leaving you. Do you think I stayed with you for your personality? Do you think I married you because you are so smart? I married you because you came with a house and a trust fund? If those are gone, you are useless to me. The words hung in the air, colder than the room itself. Kendrick looked at his wife. He finally saw the truth I had tried to show him for years. But instead of standing up, he broke. He dialed the number. He put the phone to his ear and requested a high-interest emergency loan. He sold his future to buy her silence for a few more days. 2 hours later, Kendrick returned with a stack of cash. It was dirty money, literally and figuratively. Sloane snatched it from his hands before he could even take off his coat. She did not say thank you. She did not hug him. She counted the bills with greedy fingers. Good, she said, stuffing the money into her purse. Now we can proceed with the plan. What plan? Kendrick asked, rubbing his tired face. I thought we were going to pay the utility bills. Sloane laughed. It was a brittle, manic sound. No. If we pay the bills, we are just playing by your father's rules. We are admitting he won. We are not paying him a dime. We are going to use this money to find the rest of his stash. She walked into the living room and pointed at the east wall, the wall that separated the dining room from my old study. "I have always hated this wall," she said. "It makes the room feel small. It blocks the light. And more importantly, I remember what you told me once. You said your father spent months working on this section of the house when you were a kid. You said he would not let anyone in here." Kendrick nodded slowly. "Yeah. He was reinforcing the structure. He is an engineer. He was obsessed with load-bearing walls." Sloane shook her head. "No, that is just what he told you. Old men like him do not trust banks. They do not trust the government. They hide things. Gold, cash, bonds. I bet there is a fortune hidden in this house, and I bet it is right behind that wall." She picked up her phone and called a handyman service. Not a licensed contractor, but a guy she found on Craigslist who promised to work for cash and ask no questions. When the handyman arrived, he looked like he had just rolled out of bed. He had a sledgehammer and a saw. Sloane handed him $500 from the loan shark money. "Take that wall down," she ordered. "I want it gone. I want to turn this into an open-concept yoga studio." The handyman looked at the wall. "Lady, this looks like a support wall. If I take this down, the ceiling might sag." "Just do it," Sloane yelled. "Do not tell me about architecture. Just smash it." The destruction began. The sound of the sledgehammer hitting the plaster was deafening. Dust filled the air, coating Sloane's fur coat in a layer of gray powder. She did not move. She stood there watching the destruction with a look of intense satisfaction. Every blow to the wall was a blow to me. She was destroying my legacy, my hard work. She thought she was erasing me. Kendrick stood in the corner, coughing in the dust. He felt a knot of dread in his stomach. He knew this was wrong. He knew I would never forgive this, but he was too afraid to stop her. The handyman swung again. Crack. A large chunk of plaster fell away, revealing the wooden lath underneath. He swung again. Crunch. The wood splintered. Suddenly the sledgehammer made a different sound. It was not the dull thud of plaster or the crack of wood. It was a loud metallic clang. It rang out like a bell. The handyman stopped. He lowered the hammer. "Whoa," he said. "I hit something hard." Sloane stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Is it a pipe?" "No," the handyman said. He pulled away some of the broken drywall with his gloved hands. "It is flat. It is steel." Sloane pushed him aside. She clawed at the wall with her manicured nails, ignoring the dust and the rough edges. She ripped away a piece of insulation. There, embedded deep within the frame of the house, welded to the steel beams I had installed 30 years ago, was a safe. It was large, gray, and imposing. It had a heavy combination dial and a handle that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. Sloane gasped. The sound was almost orgasmic. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it." She turned to Kendrick, her face flushed with triumph. "Look at this, Kendrick. Look, your father has been holding out on us. This is where he keeps the real money. This is why he cut us off. He did not want us to find this." She ran her hands over the cold steel of the safe door. "There could be millions in here," she said, her voice trembling with greed. "Gold bars, diamonds, cash from the old days." Kendrick stared at the safe. He had lived in this house his entire life and never knew it was there. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Dad never mentioned a safe," he said. "Maybe we should not touch it." Sloane spun around, her eyes blazing. "Are you insane? This is our salvation. This is our ticket out of this mess. We are going to open this safe, and we are going to take everything inside. It is compensation for the emotional distress he caused me." She turned back to the handyman. "Open it." The handyman shook his head. "I cannot open that. That is a Titan-reinforced safe. You need a torch, a drill, and about 4 hours. Or you need the combination." Sloane looked at the dial. She tried 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing. She tried Kendrick's birthday. Nothing. She tried my birthday. Nothing. She grabbed the sledgehammer from the handyman's grip. She swung it wildly at the safe door. Clang. The hammer bounced off, vibrating in her hands. The safe did not even scratch. "Open it!" she screamed, hitting it again and again. "Open up!" She looked like a madwoman covered in dust, swinging a hammer at solid steel in a freezing house. She thought she had found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. She did not realize that she had not found a treasure chest. She had found a witness, and inside that safe was not the money she craved, but the evidence that would seal her fate. The sound of the high-powered drill screaming against the hardened steel of the safe was deafening. It was a high-pitched shriek that echoed through the freezing hallways of the Victorian house. It sounded like a dying animal. For 3 hours, the handyman had been working on the lock. He was sweating despite the fact that the house was 40 degrees. His breath came out in white puffs that mixed with the gray dust of the demolished wall. Sloane stood directly behind him. She was holding a flashlight. Her arm was shaking, but she refused to put it down. She was possessed. The cold air had turned her skin pale and her lips were a tint of blue, but her eyes were burning with a feverish heat. She was staring at the spinning drill bit as if her life depended on it. In her mind it did. She believed that behind that heavy steel door lay her salvation. She imagined stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. She imagined velvet bags filled with gold coins. She imagined the deed to the house signed over in blank. She had convinced herself that Wallace Jefferson was a miser who hoarded his wealth in the walls like a dragon. She projected her own greed onto me. Kendrick sat on the floor in the corner of the room. He was wrapped in a blanket, hugging his knees to his chest. He looked like a frightened child. He was watching his wife destroy his childhood home, and he was too weak to stop her. Every time the drill slipped and screeched against the metal, he flinched. He knew this was wrong. He knew that breaking into his father's safe was a crime. But he also knew that they were drowning. The debt was piling up, the heat was off, the water was cold, and Sloane had promised him that everything would be fixed once that door opened. Faster! Sloane hissed at the handyman. Why is it taking so long? You said you knew how to crack a safe. The handyman pulled the drill back. The bit was smoking. He wiped his forehead with a dirty rag. Lady, this is not a normal safe. This is a Titan Series 4. It has a relocker plate made of glass. If I drill the wrong spot, the glass shatters and fires a secondary bolt that locks it down forever. I have to be precise, and this steel is reinforced with carbide. It eats drill bits for breakfast. I need another bit. Sloane reached into her purse and pulled out another $100 bill from the loan shark money. Here, just get it open. I do not care about the glass. I do not care about the bolts. Just get it open. The handyman took the money and changed the bit. He leaned his weight against the drill again. The screeching resumed. I was not there to see it, but I knew exactly what was happening. I had designed that room. I had installed that safe 20 years ago, not to hide money, but to protect the most valuable documents I owned. I knew exactly how long it would take an amateur to breach it. I checked my watch in my warm apartment. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right on schedule. Back in the house, a sudden crack echoed through the room. It was louder than the drill. It was the sound of the primary locking mechanism giving way. The handyman turned off the drill. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. Is it done? Sloane whispered. The handyman put his ear to the door. He turned the heavy chrome handle slowly. Click, click, clunk. The handle rotated a full 90 degrees. Sloane let out a gasp that sounded like a sob. She dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, the beam dancing wildly on the ceiling. She pushed the handyman out of the way with a strength born of desperation. Move! She screamed. It is mine! She grabbed the handle with both hands. It was cold to the touch. She pulled. The heavy steel door, weighing nearly 200 pounds, swung open on its precision hinges. It moved smoothly, silently, revealing the dark interior of the safe. Sloane fell to her knees in front of it. She reached inside her hands, trembling, ready to grab the cash. She was ready to feel the texture of money. She was ready to scream in triumph. But her hands grabbed nothing but air. She leaned forward, thrusting her head into the safe. It was dark. She groped around frantically. She touched the top shelf. Empty. She touched the bottom shelf. Empty. She felt the back wall of the safe. Cold steel. No, she whispered. She grabbed the flashlight from the floor and shone it into the safe. The beam illuminated the gray metal interior. There were no stacks of cash. There were no gold bars. There were no diamonds. The safe was completely empty, except for one thing. Lying in the center of the middle shelf was a single thin manila envelope. Sloane stared at it. Her brain refused to process what she was seeing. She blinked, waiting for the money to materialize. It did not. There was just the envelope. She grabbed it. She shook it. It was light. It did not rattle. It did not feel like money. She ripped the top open, tearing the paper in her haste. She pulled out the contents. It was not a check. It was not a bond. It was a document. A thick, official-looking document with a gold seal at the bottom. Sloane read the header aloud, her voice shaking with confusion and rising panic. Department of the Interior, National Park Service, National Register of Historic Places. She flipped the page. She read the next line. Property address 4522 Martin Luther King Drive. Historic designation, the Jefferson House. Former headquarters of the Southside Civil Rights Coalition. Protected landmark status confirmed 1998. She flipped the page again. Her eyes scanned the text looking for anything that resembled value. But all she found were legal paragraphs. Subsection 4. Restrictions on alterations. No structural changes, demolition, or modification of interior load-bearing walls or original fixtures may be performed without the express written consent of the Historical Preservation Board and a federal permit. Violation of this statute constitutes a federal offense and carries a mandatory fine. Sloane dropped the papers. They scattered on the dusty floor. "What is this?" she screamed. "Where is the money? Where is the stash?" Kendrick crawled over from his corner. He picked up one of the pages. He read it and his face went from pale to ghost white. "Sloane," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is not a stash. This is a protection order. Dad registered the house as a historical landmark years ago. He told me about it, but I forgot. He used to hold meetings here in the 60s. Sloane grabbed him by the collar of his sweater. "I do not care about history. I care about money. Why was this in the safe? Why did he lock it up like it was gold?" Kendrick looked at the demolished wall behind them. He looked at the pile of rubble. He looked at the gaping hole where the safe used to be embedded. "He locked it up because it proves we just committed a crime," Kendrick said. "Sloane, look at what we did. We tore down a protected wall. We destroyed a historical fixture." Sloane stood up. She kicked the papers. "No. He tricked us. He knew we would look. He baited us." She began to tear the interior of the safe apart, running her fingers along the seams, looking for a false bottom. She banged her fists against the steel. She screamed until her throat was raw. The handyman, realizing there was no money to pay him the rest of his fee, quietly packed up his drill and slipped out the back door, leaving them alone in their failure. Sloane collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the dust of her own destruction. She held her head in her hands. The adrenaline was fading, and the cold was returning, biting into her bones. She had spent $500 of borrowed money. She had destroyed a wall. She had broken into a safe. And all she had to show for it was a piece of paper that told her she was in trouble. But she did not know how much trouble yet. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. It was not the soft, polite chime of a guest. It was a firm, authoritative press. And then a heavy knock. Boom, boom, boom. Sloane jumped. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "It is the police," she whispered. "The credit card. The catering. They finally came." Kendrick stood up, his legs shaking. "Do not answer it." Ding dong. "Open up." A voice boomed from the front porch. It was a deep male voice. It commanded obedience. "Department of Buildings. We have a report of unauthorized demolition in progress." Sloane looked at Kendrick. "Department of Buildings? Who called them?" "I did not call them," Kendrick said. Sloane scrambled to her feet. She tried to wipe the dust off her face. She tried to smooth her hair. She looked at the hole in the wall. "Hide it," she hissed. "Put the painting back up. Cover the hole." It was too late. The wall was a pile of bricks and plaster. There was no hiding it. The knocking became pounding. "Open this door, or we will enter with police assistance." Kendrick went to the door. He opened it slowly. Standing on the porch was a man who looked like a tank in a trench coat. He was holding a clipboard. Behind him stood 2 police officers. But the man in the trench coat was the one in charge. His name was Inspector Miller. He was an old friend of mine. We played chess on Sundays. I had called him exactly 10 minutes after my security system alerted me that the safe vibration sensors had been triggered. Inspector Miller pushed past Kendrick without waiting for an invitation. He walked straight into the hallway. He sniffed the air. "I smell drywall dust," Miller said. He looked at Sloane, who was standing in the dining room doorway trying to block his view. "Ma'am, step aside," Miller said. Sloane tried to summon her arrogance. "You cannot just walk in here. This is private property." "Not when you are desecrating a registered landmark," Miller said. He gently moved her aside with one hand. He walked into the dining room. He saw the devastation. He saw the load-bearing wall, an original feature of the 1890 construction, reduced to rubble. He saw the safe ripped from its housing. He saw the historical documents scattered on the floor. Miller shook his head. He pulled a camera from his pocket and snapped a photo. Flash. He took a photo of the wall. Flash. He took a photo of the safe. Flash. He took a photo of Sloane covered in dust. "Flash, what do you think you are doing?" Sloane demanded, though her voice was losing its power. "We were just doing some renovations. We own this house." "Technically, the trust owns this house," Miller corrected. "And even if you owned it, you cannot touch that wall. See this?" He pointed to the scattered papers. "This house is a Class A protected site. Any modification requires a 12-month review process. You just performed an unlicensed demolition of a structural element." He clicked his pen and began writing on a pink carbon copy form. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the only sound in the room. "Violation Code 44, A. Miller muttered as he wrote. "Destruction of historical fabric. Violation Code 12B. Unlicensed contractor. Violation Code 88C. Compromising structural integrity." He tore the top sheet off the pad. It made a ripping sound that was strangely similar to the sound of Sloane ripping my photo off the wall the night before. He handed the pink slip to Kendrick. "This is a stop work order," Miller said. "You are to vacate this room immediately. It is now deemed unsafe for habitation until a structural engineer signs off on it." He tore off a second sheet, a yellow one. He handed it to Sloane. "And this," he said, "is your citation." Sloane looked at the paper. Her eyes bulged. $50,000, she shrieked. "This says $50,000. That is the standard fine for willful destruction of a landmark," Miller said calmly. "Plus, you will be required to hire a restoration specialist to rebuild the wall exactly as it was using period-accurate materials. That usually costs another $20,000 or $30,000. Sloane felt the room spin. $70,000. She did not have $70. She owed the loan shark $5,000. She owed the caterer $12,000. "And now this. You cannot do this," she pleaded, grabbing Miller's arm. "We did not know. It was an accident." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," Miller said, pulling his arm away. "Especially when the documentation was right there in the safe you broke into." He turned to leave. Then he stopped and looked back at them. "By the way, Wallace sends his regards. He told me you might be looking for hidden treasure. He wanted to make sure you found the most valuable thing in the house. The history." Miller walked out. The police officers followed him. The door closed. Sloane stood in the middle of the ruin. She looked at the pink paper. She looked at the yellow paper. She looked at the empty safe. She realized then that there was no treasure. There never was. The safe was a decoy. I had led her there. I had let her borrow money to buy the tools to break into it. I had let her expend her energy, her hope, and her sanity. I had let her dig her own grave brick by brick. She let out a scream that was not of anger, but of pure terror. It was the scream of a woman who realizes the walls are closing in and she is the one who pulled them down. Kendrick sank to the floor and put his head in his hands. He began to weep. But I was not done. The fine was just the financial blow. The real knockout punch was yet to come. Because while they were dealing with the inspector, I had been preparing the final guest list for their little party. And the next person to knock on that door would not bring a fine. He would bring a suitcase. The $70,000 fine sat on the kitchen table like a death sentence. The Victorian house was silent, cold, and partially destroyed. Sloane and Kendrick had no heat, no water, and now they had a legal order to vacate the premises within 48 hours unless the structural integrity was certified. They were trapped. They had no money to pay the fine and no money to hire a restoration team. Their only option was the man they had thrown out into the snow. They found my address on the bottom of the cease and desist letter Mr. Solomon had sent regarding the trust funds. They had ignored the letter before, but now it was their only map. They expected to find me in a small apartment or maybe a senior living facility on the outskirts of town. They expected to find a broken man. They drove to the address in silence. It led them to the Gold Coast, the most expensive neighborhood in Chicago. They pulled up in front of the Legacy Tower, a 70-story skyscraper made of glass and steel that overlooked Lake Michigan. Sloane looked out the window of the car. Her mouth fell open. She checked the address again. This could not be right. This building was for billionaires, for CEOs, for celebrities. It was not for a retired engineer from Detroit. They walked into the lobby. The floors were Italian marble. The air smelled of fresh lilies and expensive cologne. A concierge in a tailored suit stopped them. He looked at Kendrick's disheveled clothes and Sloane's dust-covered coat with polite suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked. "We are here to see Wallace Jefferson." Kendrick said, his voice small in the cavernous room. The concierge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Jefferson. One moment. He picked up a phone. He spoke quietly. Then he nodded. You may go up. Penthouse B. Take the private elevator on the left. Sloane grabbed Kendrick's arm as they walked to the elevator. Penthouse, she whispered. Her eyes were darting around, calculating the cost of everything she saw. Did you know about this? No, Kendrick said. I thought he lived off his pension. The elevator rose so fast their ears popped. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into my living room. It was a space of light and air. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the frozen lake and the city skyline. The furniture was modern leather and understated. On the walls hung original jazz posters from the 1920s framed in museum-quality glass. A fire crackled in a long, linear gas fireplace. The room was warm. It was quiet. It was the definition of power. I was standing by the window looking out at the gray water. I was wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a glass of aged scotch. I did not turn around when they entered. I let them stand there. I let them soak in the reality of who I really was. I let them realize that while they were playing house in my old Victorian property, I had been building an empire they knew nothing about. Dad, Kendrick said. I turned slowly. I took a sip of my drink. The ice clinked against the glass. You look terrible, I said calmly. They did. They looked exhausted, dirty, and defeated. The arrogance that had fueled them on New Year Eve was gone, replaced by a desperate hunger. But as Sloane looked around my apartment, I saw a change in her eyes. The fear was receding, replaced by a new kind of greed. She saw the view. She saw the wealth. And suddenly she saw a way out. Sloane took a deep breath. She smoothed her hair. She pinched her cheeks to bring some color back. Then she began the performance of her life. Oh, Wallace, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank God we found you. We have been so worried. She walked toward me, her hands outstretched. She did not look at the luxury anymore. She locked her eyes on mine, making them wide and watery. We have been calling you non-stop, she continued. When the heat went out, we were terrified. Not for us, but because we thought something had happened to the accounts. We thought maybe you were in trouble. She stopped a few feet away from me. She wiped a tear from her cheek. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I am so sorry about the other night, she said. The stress. You have no idea what I have been going through. The pressure of the business, the family expectations. I just snapped. It was not me. That is not who I am. I love you, Wallace. You are the grandfather of our future children. She looked at Kendrick. Tell him, Kendrick. Tell him how much we love him. Kendrick looked at the floor. He could not match her ability to lie. He just nodded. We are sorry, Dad. We want you to come home. Sloane stepped closer. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was cold. Please, Wallace, she whispered. The house is falling apart without you. Literally. We tried to fix a wall to make a nice room for you, a surprise yoga room for your health, and the city fined us. They want to kick us out. We have nowhere to go. Please come back. Sign the papers. Fix the fine. Be our father again. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I looked at her face. I saw the gears turning behind her wet eyes. She did not want a father. She wanted a banker. She wanted a fix-it man. She thought that if she cried enough, if she played the victim card hard enough, the lonely old man would melt. She thought I was desperate for their affection. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I walked over to the bar and poured 2 glasses of water. I handed them to my son and his wife. You broke a load-bearing wall, I stated. Sloane nodded eagerly. Yes, it was an accident, a terrible accident. We just wanted to improve the home. And the safe, I asked. Did you accidentally drill into a Titan safe for 3 hours? Sloane froze. Her mask slipped for a fraction of a second. She realized I knew everything, but she recovered quickly. We were looking for your medication, she lied smoothly. We thought maybe you left your heart pills in there. We were panicked. It was a lie so bold it was almost impressive. I had never taken heart medication in my life. I sat down in my leather armchair. I crossed my legs. I looked at them for a long time. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I let them sweat in their winter coats. You want me to come back, I said. Yes, Kendrick said. Please. You want me to pay the fine and restore the wall, I said. Yes, Sloane said. And turn the heat back on. We can be a family again. We can have a do-over. We can throw another party. A proper one. In your honor. I smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. Very well, I said. Sloane let out a breath she had been holding. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled back a genuine smile of victory. She thought she had won. She thought the old fool had bought the act. I will come back, I said. I will speak to the inspector. I will handle the fine. Thank you, Wallace, Sloane cried. She moved to hug me, but I held up a hand. However, I said, there is a condition. Anything, Sloane said. The photograph, I said. The one of Etta and me. The one you threw in the trash. Sloane nodded quickly. I will buy a new frame. A gold one. The most expensive one. No, I said. I do not want a new frame. I want the old one. I want you to go into the trash bin where you threw it. I want you to find it. I want you to tape the glass back together, and I want you to hang it exactly where it was. Sloane looked revolted. You want me to dig through the trash? I took a sip of my scotch. If you want the heat back on, yes. And one more thing. You mentioned a party. Sloane hesitated. Yes, I think that is a wonderful idea, I said. A party to apologize. A party to show everyone that we are a united family. I want you to invite everyone who was there on New Year Eve, all 25 of them, same time, same place, 2 days from now. Sloane looked confused, but she nodded. She was too relieved to question me. She thought I wanted to regain my dignity in front of her friends. She thought it was an ego trip. Okay, she said, we will do it. A reconciliation dinner. It will be perfect. Good, I said. I stood up. I walked to the door and held it open. Go home. Find the photo. I will see you in 2 days. They walked out of the apartment. They looked relieved. They looked triumphant. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Sloane whisper something to Kendrick. I saw her smirk. She was probably telling him how easy it was. She was probably planning how she would spend my money once she got access to the trust again. I locked the door. I walked back to the window. I looked down at the city lights. They thought this was a truce. They thought the war was over. They did not understand the nature of the game we were playing. I did not agree to come back to save them. I agreed to come back because the trap I had set required one final element. It required an audience. I picked up my phone. I called Mr. Solomon. Solomon, I said. They took the bait. Prepare the documents for the clawback provision. And Solomon, yes, Wallace, hire a videographer. I want the party in 2 days to be recorded in high definition. We are going to need it for court. I hung up. The fake truce had begun, and in 48 hours I would burn their world to the ground with a smile on my face. The house was warm again. The furnace was humming in the basement, pumping heat into the Victorian rooms that had been freezing just 48 hours ago. I had unlocked the system remotely, allowing them a brief respite before the final storm. The same 25 guests who had witnessed my humiliation on New Year Eve were back. They sat around the same mahogany table, eating the same expensive catering that I had paid for. But the atmosphere was different. There was a tension in the air, a brittle quality to the laughter. They were here because Sloane had told them we were reconciling. They were here because they wanted to see if the old man had truly been tamed. Sloane was wearing a modest white dress. She looked the picture of the dutiful daughter-in-law. She moved around the table, pouring wine and touching people on the shoulder. She stopped at the fireplace. The black and white photo of Etta and me was back on the wall. Sloane had retrieved it from the trash as I demanded. The glass was taped together with clear packing tape, a jagged scar running through my wife's face. It looked ugly, but to me it was beautiful. It was a trophy of my first victory. Sloane raised her glass. Her hand was steady. She was a professional actress in the theater of life. Everyone, she said, her voice soft and sweet. Thank you for coming back on such short notice. We wanted to make things right. We had a misunderstanding with Wallace the other night. Stress gets the best of us sometimes, but we are a family, and families forgive. She looked at me. Her eyes were shining with fake tears. To Wallace, she said, the patriarch of this family. Thank you for understanding, Dad. Thank you for helping us with the house repairs. We love you. The guests murmured in agreement. To Wallace, they said. They drank their wine. They looked at me with relieved smiles. They thought order had been restored. They thought the status quo remained. The rich son and his beautiful wife were in charge, and the old man was just a wallet in the corner. Kendrick sat next to Sloane. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who was walking a tightrope. He drank his wine too quickly. He knew what they had done to the wall. He knew about the fine. But he did not know what was about to happen. I stood up. I did not raise a glass. I held a remote control in my hand. "Thank you, Sloane," I said. My voice was calm. It carried across the room without effort. "I appreciate the apology. It takes a big person to admit when they are wrong. And since we are sharing, I thought it would be appropriate to share a little family memory of my own." Sloane smiled, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She probably thought I was going to show a slideshow of baby photos. She thought I was going to be sentimental. I pointed the remote at the 85-inch television mounted on the wall. It was a smart TV connected to the high-speed internet I paid for. It was also connected to the cloud server where my security system stored its data. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. It was not a grainy home video from the 90s. It was high-definition footage. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The timestamp in the corner read 2 in the afternoon. The camera angle was from the living room ceiling. It showed the very sofa where Sloane's mother was currently sitting. On the screen, Sloane walked into the frame. She was not alone. She was with a man. He was tall, muscular, and significantly younger than Kendrick. It was her personal trainer, a man named Jax, who she claimed was helping her with her core strength. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the audio coming from the TV speakers. "So when does your husband get home?" the man on the screen asked. He pulled Sloane close. Sloane laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "Kendrick. Do not worry about him. He is at a job interview that he will definitely fail. He is so pathetic. He actually thinks he is going to get hired." The guests gasped. Kendrick froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. Sloane on the screen continued. "He is useful for paying the bills, but God, he is boring. Once his dad kicks the bucket and we get the full inheritance, I am going to divorce him so fast his head will spin. But for now we have the house to ourselves." Then on the screen, in high definition, they began to kiss. It was aggressive. It was passionate. It was everything her marriage with Kendrick was not. They collapsed onto the sofa. I let the video play for 10 more seconds, long enough for everyone to see exactly what was happening, long enough for the betrayal to sink into Kendrick's bones, long enough for Sloane's parents to look away in shame. Then I pressed pause. The image froze on Sloane's face, twisted in pleasure right above the timestamp. I looked at the real Sloane. She was standing at the head of the table. Her face had drained of all color. She looked like a ghost. For the first time in her life, she had no script. She had no lie ready. I looked at Kendrick. He was shaking. He stood up slowly. His chair fell over backward. "Sloane," he whispered. Sloane looked at the screen, then at Kendrick, then at the guests. She saw the judgment in their eyes. She saw her friends covering their mouths. She saw her mother crying. She saw her reputation crumbling into dust. But then something shifted. Sloane did not cry. She did not beg for forgiveness. She did not run out of the room. Instead, her spine straightened. Her eyes went from fearful to furious. She realized there was no point in pretending anymore. The mask was broken, so she decided to show the monster underneath. She picked up her wine glass and smashed it on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot. "Turn it off," she screamed at me. "Turn it off, you old voyeur." I did not turn it off. I left it on the screen. "So what?" she yelled, turning to face the room. She pointed at Kendrick. "Look at him. Look at your son, Wallace. He is a loser. He has been unemployed for 2 years. He lies to everyone. He cannot satisfy me. Why should I be faithful to a man who cannot even pay for his own dinner?" Kendrick flinched as if she had hit him. "Sloane." "Please," he stammered. "Shut up, Kendrick," she shouted. "You are weak. You have always been weak. That is why I cheated. Because I needed a real man, not a daddy's boy who lives off a trust fund." She turned to me. She walked towards me, stepping over the broken glass. She looked like a predator. "You think this changes anything?" "Wallace," she hissed. "You think showing this little video is going to make me leave? You think you won?" I looked at her calmly. "I think the truth is out," I said. "And I think my son deserves better." "Your son is an idiot," she spat. "And you are a senile old fool. You think you can kick me out? You think you can shame me into leaving?" She laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. "I am not going anywhere, Wallace. Do you know why? Because this is my house." She pointed to the floor. "Kendrick put my name on the deed last year." She lied. Or maybe she believed it. "We are married. What is his is mine. And since you signed the house over to the trust and Kendrick is the beneficiary, that means I own this place just as much as he does." She walked back to the head of the table. She poured herself another glass of wine from a fresh bottle. She took a long sip, staring down her own parents, who were looking at her with horror. "So, here is how it is going to work," she announced. "Nobody is leaving. I am staying right here. I am going to sleep in my bed. I am going to drive my car. And if Kendrick wants a divorce, he can file for it. But I will drag it out for years. I will take half of everything. I will take the trust. I will take this house. I will take your pension." She looked at me with a smirk that was pure evil. "So go ahead, Wallace. Play your videos. Make your speeches. But at the end of the day, you cannot touch me. The law protects wives, especially wives who have been abandoned by a cruel family." She sat down. She picked up her fork and stabbed a piece of meat. "Now," she said, "sit down, Kendrick. We have guests." The room was paralyzed. No one moved. They were all looking at me, waiting to see if the villain had truly won. Sloane was banking on the complexity of the legal system. She was banking on possession being 9/10 of the law. She was wrong. I looked at Mr. Solomon, who was standing quietly in the shadows of the hallway. He nodded once. He held up a briefcase. Sloane thought she held the ace of spades. She thought she owned the table. She did not realize that I owned the casino, and it was time to close the house. Sloane was still standing at the head of the table, breathing hard. She looked like a queen who had just crushed a rebellion. She believed her words. She believed that marriage laws and squatter rights were magic shields that would protect her from consequences. She believed that because she had slept in this house for 3 years, she owned it. She was drunk on wine and entitlement. The guests were silent, looking at their plates, afraid to move. Then a shadow detached itself from the hallway. "Actually, Mrs. Jefferson, you are entirely mistaken." The voice was like grinding gravel. It was low, deep, and carried the weight of 50 years in courtrooms. Mr. Solomon stepped into the light. He was a small man in a charcoal suit, but he filled the room instantly. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at Kendrick. He looked only at Sloane. He held a leather briefcase in his hand, and he placed it on the dining table right next to the roasted duck. "Who are you?" Sloane demanded. She tried to sound fierce, but her voice wavered. "Who let this old man in here?" "I let him in," I said from my chair. "Sloane, meet Mr. Solomon. He is the administrator of the Jefferson Family Trust, and he is the man who actually owns this house." Solomon did not smile. He opened the briefcase. The twin clicks of the brass latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. He pulled out a stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. He laid them out on the mahogany table covering the spilled wine. "Mrs. Jefferson, you just claimed that this house is a marital asset. You claimed that because your husband is a beneficiary, you have a claim to the title. Under normal circumstances, in a standard ownership situation, you might have a case. However, these are not normal circumstances." He tapped the first document with a manicured finger. "This house was placed into an irrevocable trust 5 years ago. That is 2 years before you met Kendrick. The deed is not in Kendrick's name. It is not in Wallace's name. It is in the name of the trust. Kendrick is merely a tenant at will. He has no equity. He has no title. He has no ownership." Sloane scoffed. She crossed her arms. "That is just wordplay. A trust is just money. I am his wife. I have rights." Solomon adjusted his glasses. He pulled out a second document. It was thicker. "Allow me to introduce you to Article 4, Section B of the Trust Agreement. In legal circles, we call this the bad boy clause, or more formally, the forfeiture for cause provision. It states that if a beneficiary engages in criminal activity, fraud, or gross mismanagement of trust funds, their status as a beneficiary is immediately revoked." He looked at Kendrick, who was sitting with his head in his hands. "Kendrick stole $200,000 from the maintenance fund," Solomon said. "We have the bank records. We have the invoices for your handbags, your car lease, and your vacations. That constitutes fraud and embezzlement. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I filed an emergency motion with the probate court. The judge agreed. Kendrick has been removed from the trust." Sloane turned pale. She looked at Kendrick. "Is that true?" she whispered. "Did you lose the trust?" Kendrick did not answer. He just sobbed quietly. Solomon was not done. He pulled out a third document. This one was red. "And this brings us to the clawback provision," Solomon said. His voice got colder. "This is my favorite part. The trust has the legal right to recover any assets purchased with stolen funds. That means everything you bought with that money does not belong to you. It belongs to the trust." He pointed to the diamond earrings Sloane was wearing. "Those earrings cost $4,000, purchased on March 3rd with the trust debit card. Hand them over." Sloane covered her ears with her hands. "No," she screamed. "These are a gift. They are stolen property," Solomon said. He pointed to her wrist. "The Cartier watch, $6,000, hand it over. The designer dress you are wearing, $2,000, hand it over. The BMW parked in the driveway, The lease was paid with trust funds. It is being towed as we speak." Sloane backed away until she hit the wall. "You cannot do this," she yelled. "You are stripping me naked. This is harassment." "No," Mrs. Jefferson Solomon said, stepping closer. "This is accounting. You spent money that was not yours on a lifestyle you did not earn. You thought the tap would run forever. But you forgot that every tap has a shut-off valve, and we just turned it tight." He picked up a piece of paper and handed it to her. It was a list, a long, detailed list of every item she had to surrender. "You have 24 hours to place all these items in boxes and leave them on the porch," Solomon said. "If anything is missing, if a single diamond is scratched, we will file criminal charges for grand larceny against you personally. Not Kendrick, you, because you are the one in possession of the stolen goods." Sloane looked at the list. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She looked at her friends around the table, begging for help, but no one moved. They were witnessing a dissection, and they did not want to get blood on their clothes. "This is insane," she hissed. "I am not giving you anything. I am not leaving. I am going to sue you. I will get my own lawyer. I will tell the press you are abusing me." Solomon sighed. He closed his briefcase. He looked at me and nodded. "We anticipated you might be difficult." "Mrs. Jefferson," he said, "we assumed the civil route might not be enough to penetrate your thick layer of entitlement. That is why we prepared a second option." He turned toward the front door. "Officers," he called out. "You may enter." The front door opened. 2 uniformed police officers walked in. They were not smiling. They had handcuffs on their belts. Behind them was a detective in a plain suit. Sloane laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that bordered on hysteria. "What is this? You called the cops to evict me. You cannot do that without a 30-day notice. I know my rights." The detective stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted in the light of the chandelier. "Mrs. Sloane Jefferson," he said, "we are not here for an eviction. We are here for an arrest warrant." "Arrest?" Sloane asked. Her voice was small now, like a child. "For what?" "I did not steal anything yet. I have 24 hours. The detective shook his head. "This is not about the money, ma'am. We reviewed the security footage from New Year Eve, the footage your father-in-law provided to the district attorney." Sloane froze. She remembered the photo frame. She remembered the rage. She remembered throwing it. In the video, the detective continued, "You are seen forcibly removing a heavy wooden frame from the wall and throwing it in the direction of Mr. Wallace Jefferson. The glass shattered and shards struck the victim. In the state of Illinois, that is classified as aggravated battery against a senior citizen. It is a Class 2 felony." Sloane gasped. "No," she stammered. "I did not hit him. I threw it in the trash. It was an accident. He was standing far away." "The video shows otherwise," the detective said, "and we also have footage from tonight of you smashing a glass and threatening him. It establishes a pattern of violent behavior." He walked up to her. He took her wrist, the same wrist that held the stolen Cartier watch, and twisted it behind her back. "Sloane Jefferson, you are under arrest," the detective said. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Sloane began to scream, not a scream of anger, but of pure terror. "Kendrick," she yelled, "help me. Do not let them take me. Tell them it was a joke. Kendrick, do something." Kendrick looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at his wife, the woman who had cheated on him, the woman who had called him a loser in front of everyone, the woman who had spent his inheritance and destroyed his relationship with his father. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at me. Kendrick stood up. He wiped his face with a napkin. "Officer," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," the detective asked, pausing with Sloane in his grip. Kendrick looked at Sloane. "Make sure you get the watch back before you book her into jail. It belongs to the trust." Sloane's mouth fell open. The betrayal was absolute. She screamed a curse word so vile that the guests flinched. The officers dragged her toward the door. She kicked and screamed, her white dress bunching up her expensive heels, scraping against the floor she had claimed was hers. I watched her go. I took a sip of my wine. The room was silent. The video on the TV screen was still paused on her face, but the real Sloane was being hauled into a squad car, the flashing blue lights illuminating the snow outside. Mr. Solomon picked up his briefcase. "I will see you at the arraignment on Monday, Wallace," he said. "Thank you, Solomon," I said. The guests looked at me. They were terrified. They did not know what to do. Should they finish their dinner? Should they leave? I stood up. I looked at the 25 people who had laughed at me when I sat at the kids' table. Please, I said, gesturing to the food. Do not let the duck get cold. And while you eat, I suggest you all check your own bank accounts. I would hate for anyone else to have trouble with their credit cards tonight. I sat back down. I cut a piece of meat. It was tender. It was delicious. It tasted like justice. The steel doors of the county jail slid open with a heavy mechanical grind. Kendrick stood in the waiting area holding a plastic bag containing his wife's personal effects. He looked 10 years older than he had the night before. His eyes were hollow. His hands were shaking. He had just done the unthinkable. To raise the $10,000 bail amount, he had sold the only thing of true value he owned. It was a 1967 Ford Mustang, cherry red, original engine. It was the car I had bought him for his high school graduation. We had restored it together, spending weekends under the hood, getting grease on our hands and talking about life. It was the symbol of our bond, and he had just sold it to a used car dealer for pennies on the dollar to save the woman who had humiliated him. Sloane walked out. She was wearing the same white dress from the party, but it was wrinkled and stained. Her makeup was smeared. She did not look at Kendrick with gratitude. She did not hug him. She snatched the bag from his hands and checked her phone immediately. Where is the car? She asked, looking around the parking lot. I sold it, Kendrick whispered. I had to pay the bail bondsman. The accounts are frozen, Sloane. I have nothing left. Sloane let out a scream of frustration. She kicked the curb. You are useless, she hissed. You sold a classic car for this. You should have stolen the money. You should have done something else. Now how are we going to get around? Kendrick looked at her. For a moment I thought he would finally snap. I thought he would leave her there on the sidewalk, but he did not. The toxic hold she had on him was too strong. He opened the door of a summoned Uber and held it for her. We are going to a lawyer, she said as she slid into the back seat. Not your father's lawyer. A real lawyer. One who fights dirty. We are going to sue him for everything he has. Kendrick froze. Sue? Dad, he asked. Sloane, we cannot do that. He has all the cards. Sloane grabbed his face with her long nails digging into his skin. Listen to me, Kendrick. He humiliated me. He put me in a cage. I am not just going to take half his money. I am going to take it all. We are going to claim he is mentally incompetent. We are going to say he has dementia. We will say he is spending the trust money irrationally. If the court agrees, they will make you the guardian. You will control the money again. Do you understand? Kendrick nodded slowly. The desperation in his eyes was replaced by a cold resolve. He was drowning, and she was offering him a life raft made of betrayal. The next morning, a process server arrived at my penthouse. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. The man handed me a thick envelope. You have been served, Mr. Jefferson, he said. I opened the document. It was a lawsuit filed in the Cook County Circuit Court. Plaintiff Kendrick Jefferson, defendant Wallace Jefferson. The allegations were sickening. It claimed I was suffering from cognitive decline. It claimed I was abusive. It claimed I had misappropriated family funds to finance a lavish lifestyle while neglecting my dependents. It petitioned the court to remove me as trustee and appoint Kendrick as the sole conservator of the estate. I read the signature at the bottom, Kendrick Jefferson. It was shaky, but it was his. My son had signed a document declaring me insane so he could rob me. I put the paper down. I did not feel anger. I felt a deep, profound sadness. The boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball, was dead. He had been consumed by greed and weakness, and now I had to bury him. I picked up my phone. I did not call Mr. Solomon. I called Kendrick directly. Meet me, I said. Alone. He tried to argue. He said his lawyer advised him not to speak to me. I cut him off. Kendrick, if you do not meet me in 1 hour, I will release the file I have been keeping in my safe for 3 years. Not the house file. The other file. The one from your previous job at the logistics company. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so heavy it screamed guilt. I will be there, Kendrick whispered. He arrived at my apartment an hour later. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He did not sit down. He stood near the door ready to run. You sued me, I said, pointing to the papers on the coffee table. You told the court I am crazy. Sloane said it was the only way. Kendrick stammered. Dad, we have no money. You took everything. We are desperate. You are not desperate, I said, standing up. You are ungrateful. And you are a criminal. I picked up a black folder from my desk. I threw it at his feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "Open it," I commanded. Kendrick bent down and picked it up. He opened it. His face lost all color. He began to tremble. Inside were photocopies of checks, forged checks. 3 years ago, Kendrick had been fired from his job as a logistics manager. He told everyone it was a layoff due to budget cuts. He lied. He had been caught embezzling $50,000 from the company accounts. The company wanted to prosecute him. They wanted to send him to prison for 5 years. I was the one who saved him. I went to the CEO, a man I knew from my days in the industry. I wrote a personal check for $50,000 to cover the theft. I begged him not to press charges. I saved Kendrick's record. I saved his reputation. I buried the shame so he could have a fresh start. "I never told you I kept these copies," I said. "I hoped I would never have to use them. I hoped you would learn your lesson, but you did not learn. You just found a new victim. Me." Kendrick dropped the folder. "Dad, please," he cried. "That was years ago." "The statute of limitations for felony embezzlement in Illinois is 3 years," I said, "but for forgery, it is 5. And I have the affidavit from the CEO right here. He is willing to testify if I ask him to." I walked up to my son. I looked him in the eye. "Here are your options, Kendrick. Option A, you proceed with this lawsuit. You drag my name through the mud. If you do that, I will walk this folder to the district attorney's office this afternoon. You will not be the guardian of my estate. You will be an inmate in the state penitentiary." Kendrick sobbed. Tears ran down his face. "And option B?" he asked. "Option B," I said. "You drop the lawsuit immediately. You sign a document admitting that the claims were false. And then you divorce her." Kendrick looked up. "Divorce Sloan?" he asked. "She is the cancer, Kendrick," I said. "She is the one who whispered in your ear. She is the one who drove you to sell your car. She is the one who made you sue your own father. As long as she is in your life, you are weak. If you want to be my son again, you have to cut her out." "I cannot leave her," Kendrick whispered. "She will destroy me. She has already destroyed you," I shouted. My voice echoed off the glass walls. "Look at you. You are a thief. You are a liar. And now you are almost a convict. I am giving you one last chance to be a man." I pulled out a document Mr. Solomon had prepared. It was a withdrawal of the lawsuit and a petition for divorce. I placed a pen on top of it. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Choose, the wife who put you in this hole or the father who is trying to pull you out." Kendrick looked at the pen. He looked at the black folder on the floor. He looked at the door where freedom waited. His hand shook as he reached out. He gripped the pen. He hesitated for a second, thinking about Sloan, thinking about her rage. But then he looked at the police evidence in the folder. He realized the game was over. He signed the withdrawal. Then with a heavy sigh that sounded like a soul-breaking, he signed the divorce petition. "Good," I said, taking the papers. "Now get out." Kendrick looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, turning my back on him. "Now you go tell your wife that the bank is closed. Forever." The clock struck 9 in the morning. The deadline had arrived. The Cook County Sheriff Department did not care about the weather or the tears of a ruined socialite. 2 deputies stood on the porch of the Victorian house watching as the locksmith drilled out the core of the front door. I stood on the sidewalk with Mr. Solomon. I was wearing a thick wool coat and leather gloves. I was not there to gloat. I was there to supervise the recovery of assets. Inside the house, Sloan was running around like a headless chicken. She was trying to shove things into suitcases. She was screaming at Kendrick to move faster, but Kendrick was moving like a zombie. He had signed the divorce papers, but he was still physically present in the house, trapped in the final moments of his failed marriage. The deputies stepped inside. "Time is up, ma'am," the senior deputy announced. "You have exactly 60 minutes to remove your personal belongings. Anything left after that becomes the property of the trust or will be hauled to the curb by the eviction crew." Sloan ignored him. She grabbed a Ming vase from the mantel. "Put that down," I said, stepping into the entryway. Sloan turned around, clutching the vase to her chest. "This is mine," she hissed. It was a wedding gift. "Check the inventory," Solomon said calmly, opening his ledger. "Item number 402. Ming Dynasty replica vase. Purchased June 12th. Paid for with the American Express card ending in 4021. That is the trust card. The vase belongs to the trust." Sloan looked at the deputy. "He is lying," she screamed. The deputy looked at the ledger. He looked at the receipt Solomon held up. "Put the vase down, ma'am," the deputy said. Sloane screamed and slammed the vase onto the table. "Fine, keep your old junk." She ran up the stairs to the master bedroom. We followed her. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The clawback provision was not just a legal theory. It was a physical reality. Sloane dragged 3 large Louis Vuitton suitcases from the closet. She began throwing clothes into them. Silk blouses, designer jeans, cashmere sweaters. I watched her for a moment. Then I cleared my throat. "Open the suitcases," I said. Sloane froze. "What?" I said, "Open the suitcases." I repeated. "You are attempting to remove stolen property." Sloane laughed nervously. "These are my clothes, Wallace. You cannot take the clothes off my back. That is illegal." Mr. Solomon stepped forward. "Actually, Mrs. Jefferson, while we cannot take the clothes you are currently wearing, we can certainly reclaim any clothing items purchased with embezzled funds." He handed the list to the deputy. "Officer, we have reason to believe she is packing items listed on the forfeiture order. We request a bag check." The deputy nodded. "Open them, ma'am." Sloane unzipped the first suitcase. It was filled with boxes of shoes. Christian Louboutin, Jimmy Choo, Manolo Blahnik. I pointed to a pair of red-bottomed heels. $600, I said. "Unauthorized purchase. Take them out." Sloane grabbed the shoes. "No," she shrieked. "These are mine. I wore them to the gala." "Did you pay for them?" I asked. "Did you earn the money?" "No. My steel mill pension paid for them. Put them back." One by one, we stripped her. The deputy stood there, his arms crossed, ensuring compliance. Sloane tried to hide a Chanel bag under a pile of socks. We found it. She tried to wear 3 coats at once, claiming she was cold. We made her take 2 of them off. It was a slow, humiliating process. The pile of rejected items grew on the bed. The shoes, the bags, the jewelry, the electronics. Even the high-end makeup she had bought at Sephora using the emergency credit card. "What can I take?" she screamed, throwing a hairbrush across the room. "What is left?" I pointed to a small plastic bin in the corner. "You can take the sweatpants you bought at Target 4 years ago," I said. "You can take your old t-shirts. You can take the flip-flops. Basically anything you owned before you met my son and decided to become a parasite." Sloane looked at the pile of cheap clothes. It was a small, sad pile. It was the sum total of her actual worth. She began to cry. Not the fake tears she used to manipulate Kendrick. These were real tears of rage and loss. She realized that without my money, she was nobody. She was just a mean girl with no job and no skills. She packed the cheap clothes into black trash bags because we reclaimed the Louis Vuitton suitcases too. Kendrick stood in the doorway watching. He was holding a single duffel bag. He had packed his own things quietly. He took only his old jeans, his work boots, and a few shirts. He did not try to take the watches or the suits I had bought him. He knew he did not deserve them. "Get out," I said. They walked down the stairs. Sloane dragged her trash bags, bumping them against the steps. Kendrick carried his duffel. The deputies followed them out. On the front porch, the eviction crew was waiting to board up the door until the structural repairs could begin. I stood on the porch and watched them walk down the driveway. The snow was falling again, covering their tracks. They reached the sidewalk. The heavy front door slammed shut behind them. I heard the lock click, the sound of finality. Sloane stood on the curb. She looked at the trash bags at her feet. She looked at the house that was no longer hers. Then she turned to look at Kendrick. He was standing there shivering in his thin jacket. He looked at her, hoping for some kind of comfort, hoping that maybe now that they had lost everything they could at least have each other. "I am sorry," Sloane, Kendrick said softly. "I tried." Sloane stared at him. Her eyes were black holes. The mask was completely gone now. There was no audience left to impress. There was no money left to extract. "You tried," she mocked. Her voice was venom. "You are the most pathetic excuse for a man I have ever met." "Sloane." "Please," Kendrick said, reaching for her hand. "We can figure this out. We can go to my friend's house. I can get a job." "Get a job?" Sloane laughed. "You cannot even keep a job, Kendrick. You are a loser. You were born a loser, and you will die a loser." She pulled out her phone. She dialed a number. "Jax, come pick me up," she said into the phone. "Yes, right now. Bring the truck." She hung up and looked at Kendrick with pure disgust. "Jax is coming," Kendrick asked. "The trainer." He is not just a trainer, Sloane spat. He is a real man. He has his own gym. He has his own money. And he does not have a daddy who controls his allowance, Sloane. How can you say that? Kendrick whispered. I sold my car for you. I sued my father for you. I gave up everything for you. And that is why I hate you, Sloane said. Because you were stupid enough to do it. A large black pickup truck pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Jax, the man from the video, grinned. Need a ride, babe? He asked. Sloane picked up her trash bags. She threw them into the bed of the truck. She opened the passenger door. Wait, Kendrick said, stepping forward. Where are you going? What about me? Sloane climbed into the truck. She looked down at him one last time. You, she said, you are not my problem anymore. Good luck with the divorce papers. She slammed the door. The truck roared to life. Tires spun on the snow, spraying slush onto Kendrick's pants. Kendrick stood there alone on the sidewalk. He watched the truck disappear down the street. He watched his wife, the woman he had destroyed his life for, drive away with another man without looking back even once. He looked at the duffel bag at his feet. He looked at the closed door of the Victorian house. He looked at the gray sky. He fell to his knees in the snow. He did not scream. He did not cry. He just sat there in the silence of total, absolute loss. He had traded a diamond for a stone, and now he was left with nothing but the cold. From the window of the house, I watched him. I did not feel joy. I felt the heavy burden of a lesson that had to be taught. I reached for my phone. It was time for the final chapter. It was time to see if the boy could become a man or if he would stay in the snow forever. The room was number 104 at the Sunset Motel. The name was a lie. There was no sunset here. There was only the neon flicker of a broken sign buzzing outside the window and the gray slush of a parking lot filled with rusted cars. The room smelled of stale tobacco smoke and industrial cleaner. The carpet was sticky. The heater rattled like a dying engine and pushed out air that smelled like burning dust. Kendrick sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. He was still wearing the same clothes he had left the Victorian house in. His designer jeans were stained with slush. His expensive Italian loafers were ruined by the salt on the sidewalk. Beside him sat the duffel bag that contained the sum total of his life. He had $20 in his pocket. That was it. No credit cards, no bank account, no car, no wife. His stomach growled. It was a deep, painful sound that echoed in the small room. He had not eaten since the night before at the party where he had watched his life disintegrate on a high-definition television screen. He thought about the roasted duck he had left on the table. He thought about the warm bread. He thought about the wine. He looked at the vending machine outside his window. A bag of chips cost $2. A bottle of water cost $2. He calculated how long $20 would last. 2 days. Maybe 3 if he skipped meals. And then what? The silence of the room was heavy. It pressed against his ears. For the first time in 3 years, he was truly alone. There was no Sloane screaming at him. There was no father lecturing him. There was just him and the consequences of his own choices. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. The battery was at 40%. He did not have a charger. He had left it in the bedroom of the Victorian house in his haste to pack. He stared at the screen. The background image was still a photo of him and Sloane on a beach in Tulum. She looked beautiful and happy. He looked proud. He realized now, looking at that photo, that she was not smiling at him. She was smiling at the lifestyle he was paying for. He swiped the screen. He opened his contacts. He scrolled past the friends who had stopped answering his texts when the rumors of his financial ruin started spreading. He scrolled past the business associates who knew about the embezzlement. He stopped at the contact simply labeled Dad. His thumb hovered over the call button. He felt a surge of anger. This was his father's fault. Wallace had done this. Wallace had turned off the heat. Wallace had frozen the accounts. Wallace had evicted them. Wallace had ruined his marriage. Kendrick pressed the call button. He brought the phone to his ear. He was ready to scream. He was ready to demand money. He was ready to tell the old man that he was cruel and heartless. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. You have reached Wallace Jefferson. Please leave a message. Kendrick did not leave a message. He hung up. He threw the phone onto the bed. He paced the small room. 3 steps to the wall. Turn. 3 steps to the door. Turn. How dare he, Kendrick muttered to the empty room. He has millions. He lives in a penthouse, and he leaves his only son to rot in a motel. He picked up the phone again. He called again. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. Pick up. Kendrick shouted at the phone. Pick up, you stubborn old man. He called a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. By the 10th call, his anger began to fade, replaced by a creeping cold fear. What if Wallace never picked up again? What if this was it? What if he was truly cut off forever? He sat back down on the bed. The anger was gone. Now came the bargaining. He called again. This was call number 12. Dad, pick up, please. I signed the papers. I divorced her. I did what you wanted. You cannot leave me here. I have no food. I have no money. Just send me $500. That is all I ask. Just enough to get a suit for a job interview. Dad, are you there? He waited. No answer. He called again. Call number 20. Dad, I am sorry about the lawsuit. I was scared. Sloan made me do it. I know that is not an excuse, but I was drowning. Please, I am your son. You cannot let your son starve. Remember when we fixed the Mustang? Remember when you taught me how to fish? We were a team. Please, pick up. He looked at the time. It was 7 in the evening. The sun had gone down. The neon light outside turned the room a sickly shade of red. The temperature was dropping. The motel heater clanked and died. Kendrick pulled his knees to his chest. He was shivering. He called again. Call number 35. Dad, it is cold. I am at the Sunset Motel on 5th, room 104. Please come get me. I will work for you. I will sweep the floors at the factory. I will paint the house. I will do anything. I just want to come home. He listened to the ringing tone. It sounded like a heartbeat. A slow, indifferent heartbeat. He started to cry. He did not want to cry. He was 34 years old. He was a grown man. But he felt like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. The vastness of the world without a safety net was terrifying. He called again. Call number 45. Dad, please. I am scared. I do not know what to do. Sloan left me. She drove off with Jax. You were right. You were right about everything. She never loved me. She called me a loser. Am I a loser, Dad? Please tell me I am not a loser. He waited for the voicemail beep. Dad, I miss Mom. If Mom was here, she would answer. Why won't you answer? Do you hate me that much? The battery turned red. 10% remaining. Kendrick felt a wave of panic. If the phone died, he would be completely severed from the world. He would be invisible. He dialed faster. He did not even wait for the voicemail prompt anymore. He just wanted to see if the call would connect. He wanted to see if the line was still open. Call number 50. Call number 55. Call number 60. His voice was hoarse now. He had run out of words. He just breathed into the phone. He whispered the same word over and over again. Please, please, please. On the other side of the city, in the warm quiet of the penthouse apartment, I sat in my leather armchair. My phone was on the side table next to a lamp. The screen lit up. Again, and again, and again. I saw the name Kendrick flash on the screen. I saw the photo I had assigned to his contact. It was a picture of him when he was 10 years old holding a fishing trophy. He looked so happy in that picture. He looked so innocent. Every time the phone vibrated, I felt a physical pain in my chest. It was a sharp ache that radiated down my left arm. It was the instinct of a father, the biological urge to protect. Every cell in my body wanted to reach out and slide that green button. Every part of me wanted to say, I am here, son. I will send a car. I will fix it. But I did not move my hand. I took a sip of my tea. It was lukewarm. I stared at the phone. I counted the calls. 58. 59. 60. I knew what he was going through. I knew he was hungry. I knew he was cold. I knew he was scared. But I also knew that if I answered the phone now, I would destroy him. If I answered, I would be the savior again. I would be the safety net. And as long as there is a safety net, the acrobat never learns to catch himself. He had spent his entire adult life falling, knowing I would catch him. He had never felt the hard impact of the ground. And a man who has never hit the ground never learns how to stand up. Sloan was gone, but the weakness was still there. The entitlement was still there. He was calling me because he wanted a rescue, not because he had changed. He was calling because he was uncomfortable, not because he was repentant. I had to let him fall. I had to let him hit the bottom. I had to let him sit in the dark and realize that the only person who could turn on the light was him. Call number 64. Call number 65. The phone vibrated violently against the wood of the table. It buzzed like an angry insect. Then came call number 66. It rang for a long time. It seemed to ring longer than the others. It was a final, desperate plea. I looked at the picture of the 10-year-old boy. I closed my eyes. I am sorry, Kendrick. I whispered to the empty room. I love you too much to save you. The ringing stopped. The screen went dark. The room fell silent. Back in the motel room, Kendrick stared at the dead phone. The screen was black. The battery had finally given up. He held the cold device in his hand. He pressed the power button. Nothing happened. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack and fell onto the dirty carpet. He sat there for a long time. The silence was absolute now. There was no one to call. There was no one to blame. He looked at his hands. They were soft hands. Hands that had never done a day of hard labor. Hands that had signed checks from a trust fund. Hands that had held a steering wheel of a car he didn't earn. He curled up on the bed, pulling the thin, scratchy blanket over his head. He was alone. Truly alone. For the first time in his life, Kendrick Jefferson realized that he was not the main character of a tragedy. He was just a man in a room, and if he wanted to leave that room, he would have to open the door himself. He closed his eyes and finally allowed the exhaustion to take him. He slept a dreamless sleep, the sleep of the dead, or perhaps the sleep of the unborn, waiting to see if he would wake up as someone new. I sat in my apartment watching the snow fall over the city lights. I did not sleep that night. I kept a vigil for the boy who was dying in that motel room, and for the man I hoped would be born in the morning. The silence was painful, but it was necessary. It was the silence of growth. It was the silence of a lesson finally being learned. Tomorrow I would sell the Victorian house. Tomorrow I would start the foundation. Tomorrow life would move on. But tonight I sat with the ghost of my son, and I waited. I waited for the 66 calls to turn into one single action. I waited for him to stop calling for help and start calling on himself. The for sale sign was pounded into the frozen earth of the front lawn 3 days after the eviction. It did not take long to find a buyer. The Victorian house with its history and its restored woodwork was a jewel in the neighborhood. But to me, it was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of memories that had been tainted by greed. Walking through the empty rooms for the final inspection, I heard my footsteps echo against the hardwood floors. I looked at the dining room where Sloan had thrown my photo. I looked at the wall where the safe had been ripped out. I looked at the fireplace where we used to hang stockings. I felt nothing. No sadness. No regret. Just the clean, clinical feeling of a surgeon who has successfully removed a tumor. I sold the house for $1.2 million. It was a significant sum. A sum that Sloan would have killed for. A sum that Kendrick would have wasted on cars and vacations. But that money was never going to touch their hands. I sat in Mr. Solomon's office the next morning and signed the papers to establish the Etta Jefferson Scholarship Fund. Every single cent from the sale of the house went into the account. The mission was simple. We would pay full tuition for young African-American students in Chicago who wanted to study engineering but could not afford college. We would build a new generation of builders, men and women who understood the value of hard work, men and women who would build their own legacies instead of stealing someone else's. Mr. Solomon looked at me as I signed the final check. "You are a generous man, Wallace," he said. "You are giving away a fortune." I shook my head. "No, Solomon, I am not giving it away. I am investing it. I am investing in kids who have the hunger my son lost. I am investing in the future because I refuse to let the past define me. This money will not buy designer bags. It will buy degrees. It will buy dignity. It will buy freedom." I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years. I had no house. I had no dependents. I had my penthouse, my pension, and my peace. But there was one loose end left to tie. One final transaction to make. I drove my truck to a construction site in the South Loop. It was a massive development, a new high-rise going up in the gentrifying district. It was a non-union job, the kind of place that hired day laborers and paid them in cash at the end of the shift. It was brutal work, especially in the Chicago winter. I parked across the street and waited. I watched the men hauling bags of cement. I watched them shivering in the wind, their breath forming clouds of exhaustion. At noon, the whistle blew. The men collapsed onto buckets and piles of lumber to eat their lunch. I saw him. Kendrick was sitting alone on a stack of drywall. He was wearing a neon yellow vest that was too big for him. His face was covered in gray dust. His hands, the hands that used to hold wine glasses, were raw and wrapped in cheap bandages. He was eating a sandwich wrapped in foil. He looked thin. He looked tired. but for the first time in his life, he looked real. I got out of the truck and walked over to the chain-link fence. "Kendrick," I called out. He looked up. He froze mid-bite. He saw me standing there in my warm coat. Shame washed over his face. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Dad," he said. His voice was raspy. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," I said. He walked over to the fence. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for a ride. He just stood there gripping the cold metal of the fence. "I heard you sold the house," he said quietly. "I did," I replied. "The money is gone, Kendrick. It is all in a charity trust. Sloan was right about one thing. You will never see a dime of it." Kendrick nodded. I figured. "It is okay, Dad. I deserve that." He looked down at his boots. They were old work boots, probably bought at a thrift store. "I am working," he said. "It is hard. My back kills me every night. I sleep in a room I rent above a garage. It is cold, but I am paying for it. I made $300 this week. It is mine. Nobody gave it to me." I looked at my son. I saw the fatigue in his eyes, but I also saw a spark, a tiny, fragile spark of pride. It was the first time I had seen it in 30 years. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a thick envelope. I passed it through the gap in the fence. Kendrick took it. He felt the weight of it. "Is this money?" he asked. "Because I cannot take your money, Dad. I cannot do that to you again. It is not money," I said. "Open it." He tore open the flap. He pulled out a piece of paper. It was a bus ticket, one way, to Detroit. Behind the ticket was a letter. It was handwritten on my personal stationery. It was addressed to an old friend of mine, a man named Marcus, who ran a machine shop in Motor City. "What is this?" Kendrick asked, reading the letter. "Marcus owes me a favor," I said. "He needs an apprentice, someone to sweep the floors, learn the machines, work the lathe. It pays better than this. It is union work. It is a career, not a gig." Kendrick looked at me. "You want me to go to Detroit? You want me to be a mechanic? I want you to be a man," I said firmly. "Chicago is full of ghosts for you, Kendrick. Sloan is here. Your failures are here. The people who know you as a rich kid are here. You need to go where nobody knows your name. You need to start where I started, with grease on your hands and iron in your blood." I pointed to the ticket. "The bus leaves at 6 tonight. Marcus is expecting you tomorrow morning. If you show up late, he will fire you. If you show up lazy, he will fire you. But if you work, if you actually apply yourself, he will teach you how to build something real." Kendrick held the ticket like it was a lifeline. He looked at the construction site, then at the ticket, then at me. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "After everything I did." "Because I am your father," I said. "And a father does not give his son a fish when he is hungry. He gives him a fishing rod, even if he has to break his son's fingers first to make him let go of the handout." Kendrick's eyes filled with tears. He wiped them away with his dirty sleeve. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered. "Do not thank me," I said. "Make me proud. That is the only thanks I want." The foreman blew the whistle. Lunch was over. "I have to go," Kendrick said. "Go," I said. "Do not miss that bus." He turned and ran back to the site. He put his helmet on. He looked back at me once, raised his hand in a wave, and then disappeared into the dust and noise of the work. I walked back to my truck. Back to my odd. I did not know if he would get on that bus. I did not know if he would stick with the job in Detroit. That was not up to me anymore. My job was done. I had cut the cord. I had set him free. I drove north along Lakeshore Drive. The winter sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the frozen lake. The city looked beautiful. I thought about the last few months. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, the anger. It had been a fire that almost consumed me. But fire also purifies. It burns away the rot. It burns away the lies. I checked my rearview mirror. The road behind me was clear. I am 70 years old. Most people think my life is over. They think I should be sitting in a rocking chair letting my children take care of me. But they are wrong. My life is just beginning. I have learned that family is not a biological obligation. It is a spiritual, earned privilege. You do not owe your children your dignity. You do not owe them your future. If they treat you like a resource to be mined instead of a human to be loved, you have every right to close the mine. I turned up the radio. A jazz song was playing. a song Etta used to love. I smiled. I was alone in the truck, but I was not lonely. I had my self-respect. I had my legacy. And somewhere in a machine shop in Detroit, there was a chance that the name Jefferson would mean something again. My name is Wallace Jefferson. I was a father who was pushed too far. I was a victim who became a victor. And if you are listening to this and you feel like you are being drained by the people you love, remember this. The most powerful word in the English language is no. Say it, mean it, and watch how quickly the world respects you again. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to stand your ground against family, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Take care of yourselves and never let anyone extinguish your light. This journey taught me that generosity without boundaries is self-destruction. I realized that by shielding my son from the world, I was only crippling him. True love is not about constant giving. It is about having the courage to set standards. We teach people how to treat us by what we tolerate. Reclaiming my dignity did not just save my finances, it saved my soul. Remember, you are not a resource to be mined by your family. You are a human being worthy of respect. If they cannot see your value, you must have the strength to walk away and build a life where you are celebrated, not tolerated. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to find your own peace? Let's talk about it below. Until next time, stay strong.